That was Braid by Zach Thomas. Zach Thomas is a composer and MIDI artist whose work is characterized by impulse, restlessness, and precision. He received his PhD from the University of North Texas, where he worked as a teaching fellow at the Center for Experimental Music and Intermedia, while studying composition under Panayotis Kakoras. As a researcher at the X-Res Art Science Lab under the direction of Ruth West, he works on projects combining big data, sonification, and virtual reality. Since 2014, he has served as director of the new music nonprofit Score Follower, producing content for the promotion of contemporary music, including a biannual call for scores, a featured composer series, and a range of other projects aimed at increasing exposure of contemporary and experimental music to an online audience. As a composer, he works often in mixed media contexts and is author of numerous concert works, installations, and software tools. His work and research have been presented at various international festivals and conferences, including Warsaw Autumn Festival, Darmstadt Summer Courses, ICMC, ZEMUS, NYCEMF, NIME, Musica Acustica Festival in Beijing, SIGGRAPH, Forum Wallis, Audio Art Festival in Krakow, and others. So, Zach Thomas, thank you very much for doing the interview. As I told you, I got acquainted with you through your piece, Braid, if I'm pronouncing it right, on Score Follower, and I instantly loved it. The sound colors were so unique that it just instantly grasped me. So maybe you can start with talking about the piece, how you developed it, how do you usually work, because we were discussing how specific the sound production is with the instrument. So just talk a little bit about how you came up with the idea.
Yeah, of course. So this piece was initially written for MCME, the Moscow Contemporary Music Ensemble, as part of the, I think it's called like Tchaikovsky Composer Academy, or something similar to that. It's a composer academy I went to at some point during my PhD, I think maybe 2018 or 2019. I arrived there with the piece pretty much mostly complete, and then I worked some during the rehearsals with the musicians, but the ideas were sort of in place beforehand. But I don't know, I can maybe be more generalized. So like my compositional workflow is it's probably unorthodox to what most composers are doing, and while it does open a lot of possibilities for me creatively, it certainly also has downsides. Firstly, I perform just about everything I write myself, and often I'm composing, like during the compositional process, I'm composing directly into DAW, like a recording software. And then I sort of make notes and sketches, sometimes video recordings of the things that I'm doing. But I generally try to not make decisions about notation until very late in the process, until the piece is more or less like formed and complete. And for me, this kind of frees me from needing to be able to conceptualize the notation of the sounds I'm using. So I'm not burdened by like the past notational strategies or the task of like having to invent something new. I don't want basically me having to theorize about how I'm going to notate something to interfere with the sounds that I'm choosing and how I'm making them. And this comes a lot through like my background as an improviser, because I got into contemporary music pretty much through improvisation. Let's see. I also work with prepared instruments a lot, in this piece particularly. And I use these like restrictions on the instrument to provide an environment for more, I think it provides an environment for more creative potential, to where on one end, I'm after a very specific sound, so I'm altering the instrument to get that sound, as we talked about with clarinet. Like I'm after a very particular sound that you can't get with a traditional clarinet, so I'm modifying the clarinet to get to this sound.
So do you have the sound like beforehand? You imagine it and you try to achieve a certain thing, or does that come out while you're improvising?
It's kind of a recursive process, right? So I'm trying out different preparations or different techniques, and I hear something and I say, oh, but maybe if, this, or maybe if I can tweak it this way to achieve this thing, or this is a really cool sound, but it's very hard to control. What can I do to the instrument to make it performable, or something? Questions along these lines sort of guide my decision making. Um, so, in some sense, I'm after particular sounds and I'm modifying the instrument for that. But the other thing, I think, when you're working with prepared instruments, it kind of helps to uh, basically you're restricting the amount of type of sounds that the instrument can produce, while alternatively opening up new possibilities. So when I prepare this clarinet, I can't play scales and things like you can on a traditional clarinet with this instrument that is essentially a vacuum that's producing like compressed air sounds. If for those of you that haven't heard it, you can see the score and the notes on Score Follower. But this prepared instrument cannot make traditional clarinet sounds very well, but it can make the sounds that it's designed to do very well. So I think this type of like restrictions sort of provides a composer with more opportunities to be creative in that sense, and in ways that you're not able to do, or it's much harder to do with a traditional non-prepared instrument that has like 1,000-year history of techniques developed for it, you know?
Yeah,
Um,
and well, that's well, you're. I assume you are a clarinet player, right?
no.
No, you're not. Okay,
Yeah.
well,
Yeah, I'm trained. I'm trained as a vocalist, so that's like what I studied at university. But uh, because I've sort of found this working method where I basically work very closely with the instrument throughout the entire process, and I can pretty much play all the material in my pieces. I may not be able to do it as well as a trained performer. Like I wouldn't get up on stage and perform the whole thing bar to bar, but uh, like the recording on Score Follower, that's me doing both parts.
that
That
was
I've just
one of my questions. Like, so you are the person who performed the piece.
Yeah, I mean the piece has been performed like live by a couple different groups, but in that recording, it's me doing both parts where I just multi-tracked the clarinet part and then did the cello part.
Well, this kind of opens up another question in my head because if you're
Hmm.
working so close with the instruments, um, do you ever get satisfied when other people do it? Like, does it ever get close to the ones that like you would like to have?
Yeah, I think so. Some things, I mean, it's kind of contingent, but some things it's hard to be satisfied with, especially if it's something like this piece where if I've already made the recording, and the recording is kind of like the idealized, pristine version of it, right? Where I've done different takes of different things and put it together. You're not going to get that in a performance, but you're going to get things that, at least for me, things that I'm not able to do. Like a performer is someone who's trained on a clarinet, even a traditional clarinet, and not my, strange clarinet, is expressive in a way that I'm not. So they're going to pull things out of the piece that I'm not able to. So I'm satisfied in different ways, if that makes sense.
That does make sense, but I'm also curious because, well, musicians are sometimes very sensitive about their instrument. And, well, you work a lot with prepared instruments. So, what have your experiences been in this regard? Like, how open were the musicians, or, yeah.
I think, in my experience, this is almost never an issue, but it's because of some, I don't know. It's like the people that find my music and that are like messaging me, "Hey, can I have the score for this? Hey, can you write me a piece?" They already know what they're looking at. Does that make sense? Like, because my music is so experimental, like the notation looks unorthodox, the sounds are unorthodox. If someone is asking me for something, they're already into it, you know? So I'm like the situation that you're describing, I think it's a very familiar situation. Every composer knows this situation where they're like trying to get a performer to do some extended technique that they're not familiar with. But like, especially as you get a little bit further on in your career and you're not hunting down uh, any performer that you can get a hold of, like you might be doing as a student, uh, you're very rarely like in the room with somebody that's not already interested in your music. Does that make sense?
It does, definitely. Well, of course, I don't know how it is because in Vienna, I mean, we have this very traditional background, like of music. So sometimes, although people are into like contemporary music, they might be skeptical about preparing their instruments, especially when it comes to other material, touching their instruments.
Yeah, I will say what I have done is I have like actually I don't have a clarinet right now, but I do have a cello and I have cheap instruments that I just have that I've collected over the years. If someone's not doesn't want to use their own instrument, I give them mine to perform. When I went to Russia to do this piece, I brought my clarinet, and he used mine on the performance. I've had another person do it, and they didn't care. They used their own instruments. So I think it depends on the person. But if that is an issue, I think a valid one that people are sort of recalcitrant to put duct tape on their $2,000 instrument. But I think luckily because the type of music that I'm writing is not necessarily dependent on a super high quality clarinet, a super high quality cello, because of how I'm modifying the instrument. It doesn't if you played my cello piece on $1 million Stradivari cello and you played it on a $100 student instrument, like it's not going to make a
Probably
difference.
sounds better on the student one.
It might actually.
Yeah.
So in these instances, like having like a beater instrument that you can sub in, I think is helpful.
Well, going back to the how you compose, you said improvisation is a very important part of the process in your case.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, well, I'm personally like a formal person. I'm very interested in sound colors, but they confuse me so much. Like if I experiment a lot and there's so many options, and then I'm like, how am I gonna put them together in a linear manner so that I get like a whole piece? So how do you deal with that? Do you often get overwhelmed by the possibilities, or how do you choose like some of your improvisational parts?
Well, this goes back to the what I was saying about preparing the instrument, sort of reducing the range of possibilities. I think if you prepare an instrument in a certain way, it's only the range of possibilities is so narrow that there's only so many combinations of sounds you can get out of this prepared instrument. Especially this clarinet that is mostly producing like noise blasts sounds, there's only so many. If you prepare the instrument in such a way that maybe there's only 6 to 8 different possibilities for this instrument, it's not so hard to work with those materials. I mean, I do work very clinically when I am exploring, despite like doing a lot of like improvisation on the instruments to try to find the sound material. I do work pretty clinically and like catalog the sounds. And I think that helps to have sort of a record of like recordings and notes of things that your instrument can do when you're putting this kind of stuff together,
Yeah, and well, it takes a while to get to that narrow, like choices. So how do you get to that point? Like, how do you like leave out different like techniques to get to this setting in which there are only limited things possible?
I don't have a good answer for that. It just kind of happens over time as I hone down on what the piece is about. I think like if we take this piece in particular, it was the main sort of concept of the piece of this like braid is to have sort of two elements that are gradually, as the piece progresses, they become more and more like intertwined and locked together. So with this piece, I kind of needed material that worked in this like Hocket-like texture at the beginning, but was also able to blend uh, quite well near the end of the piece. And I kind of had this formal idea in mind before I started working with the material. And I think, I don't know, having some kind of like a priori structure that can help guide your decisions is helpful in that sense.
Well, yeah, definitely. And regarding the notation, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
you're mostly the person who first plays the piece, and then you said you worry about the notation.
Mm-hmm.
Is it usually easy to make your pieces conveyable to other musicians? Like, because like I could imagine that it would be a difficult task to
Yeah.
make them in a way so that another person could play it without you, without you being present there.
Yeah, it is that's the most challenging part, I think. I mean, uh, I do spend a lot of time on the score. Um, like if you look at the score, it's very detail oriented, and I have sort of kind of my own notational strategies that I've developed using sort of a prescriptive graphical notation, where I'm mostly notating actions rather than aim for this, hit a B flat here. I never say that. For instance, there's very rarely like a note head in my score. Um, so I think having a notation that allows for some a range of variation helps in that regard. The other thing is that the notation is kind of designed to be very detail oriented on the levels that I'm most interested in controlling. So the notation provides a lot of information that allows you to control, the timbre, the texture of the sound. Uh, the way that I notate rhythms sort of allows for rhythms that respond to momentum and things like that aren't necessarily locked into a grid. So the notation is not like, this is not like a Klaus Stefan Mankoff score with like 7 different staves for one performer, where every, you're really the performer is has to control everything. There's quite a bit of freedom in this notation, but I put the freedom in areas that don't require as much detail, if that makes sense.
It does. But I'm just wondering because, well, you have to specifically write
Mm-hmm.
an introduction, how you want the instrument to be prepared, right?
Yep.
And if you're not there, they will be doing stuff. So you mean that
Mm-hmm.
with this preparation, these sounds are only possible. So automatically, if they would just read what you've written there and like do it as it's written there, they would get the sound outcome that it's desired, right?
Yeah, I mean, if it's done correctly, that's you're kind of like 90% there. If you've prepared the instrument correctly and you've understood the directions. On top of that, I do a lot of like, um, if I'm writing for someone specifically, I'm trying to work with them throughout the whole process, and I'm sending them recordings and videos of me doing stuff. And if this is like a repeat performance, some new group doing the piece, like I had this piece Braid performed at the Warsaw Autumn Festival, and a new group did it that had never done it before, and I'd already had a bunch of recordings of me doing all these techniques from the previous performance. So I kind of sent them that. And I was able to work with them directly because I went to the festival. But in a situation where I can't be there and like have no like face-to-face contact, these sending recordings and videos and things like that. A lot of composers do this if they're working with unconventional techniques, and I think it's kind of the best way because hearing the sound, and especially like seeing someone perform the action, explains it so much faster than like reading a wall of text explaining how to do, get the bow in this exact position.
Exactly. That's why I think it's really hard to achieve a specific color with
Yeah.
just notation. But that's the advantage that we have in these days, that we have videos, and like older musicians, who are dead. I mean, they didn't have that possibly.
Yeah, and I think while there is value in having like clear and readable notation, like I think you do yourself a disservice by belaboring over it to the point that like it detracts from other elements of your creativity. Like if you can explain something in a video or in a recording, like do it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's makes
You don't
sense.
need to have this like perfect score artifact that needs to exist for like 500 years that people are like, probably in 500 years, no one's going to be looking at this piece. So I don't need the score to like translate beyond my lifetime. At least that's the way that I look at it. I don't.
That's a very logical way to look at it, and
Yeah.
very practical. I mean, it's not about.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm wondering, maybe it comes from your openness, because you're also a media artist, and like multimedia artist. So you don't have this prejudice of like the written score thing, and
Yeah.
so maybe we can talk about that a little bit. Like, in what other mediums are you active, and how did you like go in those directions?
I'd say primarily I am a composer, but I generally, me is like in terms of like my productivity, just the way that I work, I'm more productive if I'm doing like 3 or 4 different things rather than spending 100% of my attention on one thing. So if I have multiple projects going, I'll accomplish more than if I'm doing one project and then the next project and then the next project. And having those projects like be separated into different mediums or require different skills or knowledge bases, it forces me to like learn new skills, which I'm like obsessed with, probably to a fault, and it allows me to be more productive. In terms of the just general like media art stuff, I have some pieces that have like fixed video elements to them. I have some stuff with like live video elements. Probably most interestingly, I worked on a big. I've done a number of installation works that use like cameras or video or motion tracking stuff. I worked on this big project that was a collaborative work with a bunch of scientists, where we took a bunch of astronomical data from this star survey in Antarctica with like almost 1 million data points of stars. And we created this like multiplayer VR space where people could pass around stars, and I created this sonification system to where each star had its own like melody and instrument associated with it. So that sounds nothing like my normal music, because it was made for like a general audience.
But is that like available somewhere to be looked at online?
Yeah, if you Google One Antarctic Night, you can probably find it.
Yeah, so I'll probably put the link under this video.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a project. I did my PhD at the University of North Texas, and there's a lab there that's run by Ruth West, who's kind of a very interdisciplinary artist who has like a background in biology, but she also got an art degree and runs this lab that is a lot of collaboration between artists, musicians, and scientists. So I sort of found my way into that project through that. But it was a really rewarding experience, even though it sounds nothing like my my concert work.
Speaking about concert works, how did you get into music generally?
I started music pretty late, maybe when I was 15 or 16. I joined like the school choir and I started playing guitar. And I think through guitar, I sort of became more interested in improvisation. And, I was playing in jazz groups and stuff around town. I played in the school jazz band. And I sang this entire time. I wasn't really writing much music, but I was writing some, but I was more interested in improvisation. And then I went to get a degree in music theory. And eventually I kind of became fed up with music theory because there was very little opportunity for me to like study or publish on the type of music that I was interested in, which is sort of contemporary or experimental music. So I sort of found my way moving into composition. And then I eventually went to get my PhD at the University of North Texas. And that's sort of really where I started to compose seriously as like my main activity.
How do you think your compositional style has developed in these years? I mean, how different it is now than like 10 years ago.
Yeah, so I think the general thread that runs through all of it is the influence of uh, improvisational practice, and even more so maybe like improvisers and the sounds that they produce on the material. But other than that, it's changed quite a bit. I mean, I used to mostly, because I went through like a traditional compositional training. I was writing mostly standard notes and rhythms music without using graphic scores and things like that. Once I started my PhD, I started doing more graphic notation, and I worked very closely with Panagiotis Kokoros, who teaches there, and he works very closely with instruments. I think he can probably play, most of the parts of his pieces, and that's kind of where I learned to, adopt that method.
That's also one thing I'm curious about. How much time did you spend with the clarinet to write Braid, for example? Or like generally, how much time do you spend with the instrument?
I don't know. It's hard to say like, I spent 60 hours. I have no idea. But
Just to give an idea,
I will
like,
say,
you know.
yeah, the piece probably came together pretty quickly. Maybe in like 2 months, I had sort of come up with all the material and written it out, and that's what I took uh, to Moscow. And then after the first performances, I took it uh, back to North Texas, and I revised the piece and did the recording that you hear on Score Follower. And that was maybe another month and a half of work. But honestly, I think the way the instruments are designed, like they're only good at a few things. So I don't have to become a virtuoso at 20 different techniques like a violinist does on their instrument. And the techniques are pretty easy to produce once you get the general concept down. So the pieces are kind of written in such a way that like I could give this clarinet part to a percussion player and they'd probably be fine, to be honest. Like you need to be the hurdle is like being willing to play the piece, not learning it, if that makes sense. I don't think it's particularly challenging to produce the sounds once you're open-minded enough to attempt it.
Speaking of Score Follower, you said that you were involved in the project Score Follower. You mean like the channel, like the app or whatever it's called? So you were responsible for that amazing thing?
Yeah, I mean, it's not just me. We have the project is mainly overseen by 4 people. It's Dan Trampty, who is the founder, Ermir Bayo, myself, and Victoria Chia. And we have some other people that help us sometimes produce videos or curate pieces. We have like a jury that helps us judge our call for works. but yeah, in the very early beginnings of that project, it was sort of a way for us to kind of get access to scores and learn ourselves, and also like share the things that we were learning with other people. And it eventually became such like a critical resource for people that we became obligated to, you know, keep doing it and doing it at a high level. So I think one of the things that really differentiates the project is that we collect permission for everything that gets posted there, and that's really the hardest part, is getting, you know, if we do a piece uh, by James Dillon, we need to have a sync license contract with Peters and maybe Coleño record label, and like, you know, there's 4 or 5 different signatures that we need to collect to get, you know, one 15-minute YouTube video online. Whereas most people making these kind of score videos aren't doing this type of thing. They're just throwing stuff up there that they are interested in. And I'm happy for people to do that, but it's not going to have any kind of longevity most of the time, because the rights holders might be able to take it down. So I think it's important for us for this project to have kind of a longevity, and even after, like, even if we're no longer able to maintain it, like, it's still going to be up there, you know.
Do you have to pay something for the rights of them?
Most of the time, no. And it's also because we make very little money, like, doing Score Follower. I mean, we collect some donations and things like that, but it's not like a super lucrative, you know. We're making videos that are popular for contemporary musicians, but they're not popular by like YouTube standards, right? It's not like a video with 9 million views of a cat playing the piano. It's it's not generating any ad revenue. We actually turned off all the ad revenue just because it was so low. It was like $50 a month we were making, so we just turned it off. So we don't make any money, so it's hard to pay licensing
But that's
for
good
these
that
things.
the people understand, you know, because
Yeah,
they could be like,
and
no,
a lot
you
of
should just,
times,
yeah.
yeah, a lot of times for them, it's like it's sort of used as an advertising opportunity, because all the people watching these videos are like, of the people willing to like purchase a score or uh, you know, purchase a CD or something. Those are the people that are already watching Score Followers. So it's kind of a captive audience of the people most interested in contemporary music. So we, you know, if it's a record label, we put the links to the score in the notes. So if anyone's interested in, they can go purchase the score. We link to composers' web pages or record labels' pages and things like that, to where, you know, sometimes we have record labels contact us and say, "Hey, we have this CD coming out. Could you do a video of this piece or something like that?" You know. So it's kind of like a, you know, an alternative advertising for these types of projects. But we're also we're doing a bunch of other stuff too. We started doing like I don't know, trying to make a little bit more income. We have this TikTok channel now where we sort of transcribe like any sort of strange sound on TikTok, where we show the notation of, like, I think the latest one we had was like these gibbon monkeys like squealing, doing all these crazy glissandos. We notate that with like very high level of detail. I think it's just Score Follower on TikTok. Dan Trampty is the one who mostly does that. He has an insane transcribing ability. We're also we're also developing, I think probably most interesting is we're developing an application, like a website, where people can make their own Score Follower videos in like a browser-based editor. So you wouldn't need to send your stuff to us to have it made. You could just make it yourself in a very easy way, like upload your score, upload your recording, and kind of just say, these are the timestamps, and put everything in. So we've been working on that for maybe a year, and we're pretty close to entering like a beta phase of that. But we're sort of trying to build like a composer portfolio platform.
This is crazy. Like, I mean, when I heard like your piece, I wasn't aware that I'm in contact with the person responsible for this whole project. I mean, it's really wonderful. And um, you said you started with these 4 people, and then you have people
Mm-hmm.
who are in kind of like a committee who decide whether like some scores are right for you. So people either send it to you, and
Mm-hmm.
you like consider the scores, or you curate, you said.
Yep.
So maybe you can talk about the committee, who's in the committee, and the curating part. Like, how do you choose pieces?
Sure. We have so most. I think when we first started, we were mostly almost everything came through curation, and we never really had a call for works until maybe 2 or 3 years in. And then once we started the call for works, it sort of gradually grew to now where we have like if we do a call for works twice a year, and we're selecting maybe like 70 to 80 pieces each call, and doing maybe 200 pieces a year. Um, it's like 700 plus. It's a lot. I can't think of a bigger call for works. It's a lot of pieces. So it sort of became so big that we can't listen to all these things by ourselves. So we created basically the judiciating process is we have a first round where the 4 of us listen to each person listens to half the pieces. So that's maybe 400, 350 pieces, and we're pretty much just deciding. I don't know how many people know that this is the process, what their work goes through, but if you're listening to this is what's going on when we're listening to your pieces. The first process is we're sort of just deciding like, is this okay to be on the channel? And it's sort of weeding out pieces with like lots of notational errors or um, it's someone's entry level student piece that's some 2-part Bach convention or something like that. That's like, it may be like well composed, but it probably doesn't belong on Score Follower. Um, and that cuts out sometimes like half the pieces. And then in the second round, we have a jury of now it's sort of up to like 13 people. And we try to rotate people in and out of the jury so that if someone's work doesn't get selected, they have a better chance with like a new jury, because like it's like a lot of it is like the taste of the jury sort of deciding the pieces. It's not like if your piece doesn't get selected, it doesn't mean it's a bad piece. Sometimes it's just like the preference of the jury as to what they want to select, I mean, we invite people to be in the jury. Sometimes it's I don't know. It's hard for me to list every single person off the top of my head. If you want to see who's in the jury, you can go to our website and the about section, and you can see. I think you maybe even be able to see who was in there each year, but it's usually 10 to 13, 15 people, and we have a system to where basically the whole list of pieces are split up into 15 sections, and the person starts and they try to at least listen to half of the second round pieces. So the really each piece in the second round is being listened to 4 or 5 times. So it really gets a lot of attention. And then in the very final round, we kind of we more or less agree. We don't cut a lot of pieces that the jury selects, but we'll sort of go through and sort of try to at least balance out things to where, like, I don't know, people love sending string quartets, like so many string quartets. The best thing you can do to get selected is not send a string quartet, because everyone has a string quartet that they're super proud of. And we're not going to program 40 string quartets.
I don't even have one string quartet.
Neither do I, actually. But most people have a string quartet that's performed by like Arditi or Jack Quartet or Mivos or something that they're really proud of. So they're sending these amazing string quartets, and we just like can't do them all. So we balance things out and like try to get a range of different aesthetics, different types of notation, instrumentation, all these types of things.
Okay,
And that's kind of the final process.
well, this brings me to one of the other questions. You have to choose a lot of pieces. So, what is your own taste? Like, what do you listen to? What kind of music do you listen to? Favorite composers, people, artists?
Yeah, I mean, I think I have my preferences, but in terms of like score follower specifically, I try not to let. At the very beginning, I'll say this. At the very beginning, when I was doing most of the curation for the page, I was like mostly just picking stuff that I really liked. So if you want to figure out what I like, you can just go look at what's on there.
Probably the earlier ones,
ago.
right?
Yeah, but I try to not let that influence how I pick
how is
things
it
in
possible?
the judiciary process.
You when you're looking at something, you have your own criteria.
You just become so, man, after listening to like thousands of pieces, like year after year after year, like you sort of developed a distance and an agnosticism to your own preferences. And you're also able to think about, well, how will this perform? What will people say in the comments? Will this get views, or will this be? I love picking like controversial pieces, something that I think someone's gonna really like and someone else is gonna really hate. Like those pieces are nice to have on. It's also nice to have pieces that are just like really well composed pieces that don't fit my aesthetic at all. Like I want the piece to have some kind of like diversity of aesthetic. So if I only pick the pieces that like appealed to like my style of composition, the project would not be as successful because it would only appeal to people with my personal taste.
That's basically what I'm doing with the podcast. I'm basically picking people according to it. Maybe I grow up a bit later and I have people who are a bit different.
Well, I think it helped me a lot to do that with Scorefollower because I got access to things that I probably wouldn't otherwise. But in terms of like the health of the project, I had to eventually make decisions, or like it's not just me making these decisions. Like we as a group have to make decisions about other things, and the other part of that is like bringing in other people to make the decisions for you. So it's like you trust the person to make a good choice that's not your choice.
That's amazing because as a composer, I mean, I don't know, but it's an isolating like form of art. You're alone in creating stuff, so I don't know, like sometimes it's hard to let other people decide, but you're also very open with your notation, as you said. So yeah. Well, thanks for clarifying that. And do you have like recent people that you've discovered that were on Scorefollower?
Like that I particularly
like I
enjoyed?
discovered you, for example.
Yeah. I don't know. It's really these types of questions are really hard to answer. Do you ask this question to other?
Yeah, but you don't have to answer it. I mean, sometimes nothing comes to mind.
I think this is a hard question for people to answer because they don't want to like. They worry that if they say something, someone else is going to be offended because they're like left out.
Oh, really? No, come on.
No.
I mean,
I'll say one of my favorite pieces that I curated specifically was this. This is 4 years ago. Gosh, this was so long ago. This Ava Reiter, the Lichtenberg figures.
So we're gonna put that also under the video.
It's a huge piece. It's like an hour-long multi-movement ensemble piece for voice and instruments. But that was one of the pieces that like I want to study this piece, so I'm going to spend 3 hours making this video, and contact the composer. This piece wasn't online. The score wasn't online anywhere, so I contacted Ava to get the piece. Which I wouldn't have been able to do otherwise. but this is it's something that I really wanted to study. So I sort of used Score Follower to get access to the piece and put the video together. But it's an awesome piece. And I think she's also, one of the reasons I'm attracted to her work is she's also like performing a bunch of stuff herself. She actually does, performs on her pieces live, which I'm probably not able to do, but yeah, her work is great. I would, if you're looking for me to drop a name.
No, that's fine. I mean, that's enough. I'm just really curious.
Yeah, Ava Reiter.
Yeah.
Ava Reiter
yeah,
is awesome.
I wrote her down.
Yeah.
And it's not about like getting some like tips. It is about tips. It's not about like name dropping. So these are Zach Thomas's favorite composers. It's just that people who might be cool to check out. And but I definitely understand what you're doing. Basically, this is why I do the interviews. I just try to get contact with people. And so it's very understandable. And
it's a good method.
But like other people profit from the Score Follower, I'm sure. I mean, this is really great, and I'm personally very grateful to it. And one of the like funny things that I wanted to ask you was about your teaching, because you started teaching. How's that going? How do you deal with students?
It's going pretty well, I think. I have kind of a unique, I don't know how unique this is. I think in the United States, it's becoming more and more common that these kind of academic jobs, you're sort of required to wear multiple hats to be able to teach multiple things and stuff. So I teach, like, some of my students are like grad level composers, and some of them are part of our new media program, which is kind of like a creative music technology program. So they're interested in making like commercial music or being recording engineers or doing game sound or these types of things. And I find it very rewarding to, work with people on either side of this spectrum. And also getting these students to work together and having the ways that they think kind of cross-pollinate, What else about students? For teaching, I just try to not, my number one rule is try to not get in the way of their enthusiasm. I think school is like, education in general is very good at like beating the life out of you in terms of like trying, it gets people to sort of treat their passion like a job and sort of lose the thing that make them want to go into the field as in the first place. And when you're teaching, really the student is going to be their best teacher if they're interested in the material. So getting people interested in the material is like my number one directive, and try to not get into the way of their enthusiasm, basically because I may be with a student 1 hour out of the week, but they're responsible for their education for the rest of the week, rest of the hours in the day. So making somebody like want to learn is sort of the ideal directive for me in teaching.
Okay, Zach Thomas, thank you very much. Thank you.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
Sure. So this is basically like off the record from now, and because you practically answered the last questions, and
okay, sure.
But it was a real pleasure. I mean, I was very, very excited about it. And,
it was fun for me too. Thanks for inviting me.
Of course, yeah. And actually, speaking about catalogs and vocal stuff, I also do like vocal experiments, and I also made this like voice catalog thing. And I put it on my website because I was like, if people would do it with their instruments, just put it out there in the catalog, like what they can do. That would be really terrific. But because I mean, not everybody has access to instruments to experiment with.
Yeah, exactly. So when performers do that kind of stuff for you, it's a blessing.
It is, and because you can't ask them to do everything, so doing it yourself. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you know this guy? Do you know, there's this, I've worked with them. They're a duo of voice and recorders, Javier Hagen and Ulrike Meyer-Spohn from Switzerland. This guy Javier is like a crazy countertenor with an insane range. And if you want sort of like a catalog of vocal stuff, he also has that kind of catalog of stuff on his website. And Ulrika, she also has the same thing for recorders to even more degree. If you go to, what is it called? Ulrika Meyer-Spohn. Hold on, I can send you. There's sort of like, compendiums of all the things that recorders can do. And she has sound examples of everything.
Have you ever done anything with the Petzold flute? Do you know it? This big weird one?
Me? No. I mean, it's an awesome instrument, but I've never written for it.
Do you have any preferences, like with instruments, like winds or strings or?
I find it harder to work with brass. I have like one piece for solo trumpet, but I have I don't know. I like the opportunity to force myself to try things that I've never worked with before.
What's the craziest instrument you've composed for?
Craziest? I mean, I have a piece for accordion, which in the United States, no one ever, there's no accordion players in the US. They just don't exist. So I wrote a piece for accordion when I was at Darmstadt a few years ago. But I did a piece for solo saxophone that has a 3D printed reed. So it's a synthetic reed that's super thin. So it can produce these crazy sounds where this rattling sound, or it's very good at the technique where you put your teeth on the reed and create really high overtones and squeals and stuff. It's super expressive in that technique because of how thin the reed is. You have a lot of control. You can glissando an octave.
Is there any recording of it?
There is, but I'm not super. I'll share this with you, but I'm not super happy with the recording, so I don't have it online.
Sure, it's just about the color,
Yeah. If you want good recordings of this reed, it was actually invented by Panayotis Kokoros, my teacher. So I think his recordings are probably a better example. Maybe I can find one for you.
Yeah, a friend of mine did it with the clarinet, and they just call it the teeth notes, but it was not really that flexible in terms of controlling them.
Yeah, it's different. It's much different with this reed. That's it's made out of a plastic, and it's millimeter thickness. It's super, super thin. But this piece, he didn't do that for this piece. I don't think we posted this one, but yeah, you should check out this one. And he has some other pieces where he uses this reed, but it's it's an insane sound. It was fun to work with that, although it was really challenging, because it's so different, and it's challenging for the performer too, because the embouchure is if you play with a normal embouchure, it makes no sound whatsoever.
I don't want to take much of your time, but it was a real pleasure, and thank you for doing it.
Yeah, no problem.